And after I left Miss Martin's class, I continued adding new words and their definitions to my notepad. I also wrote down other things I needed to learn for school and things I wanted to know by heart, like spelling words and math and grammar rules. I carried the notepad in my shirt pocket and, while I worked in the fields, memorized the information I had written in it. I took my librito with me wherever I went. After traveling for about 5 hours, we arrived at our new home in Orosi. It was an old yellow 2-story wooden house. It was located about 15 miles outside the city limits. Mr. Partrini, the owner, told us that the house was 70 years old. We could not use the second level because the floors were unstable. The first floor had 2 rooms and a kitchen. Behind the house was a large barn and hundreds of vineyards. It did not take long to unload our carcaricha and settle in. Papa and Mama and Rhoda took one room. Roberto, Trumpita, Torito, Ruben, and I moved into the other one. After my brothers and I had put away our few things, I sat on the floor and looked at my pennies. I wanted to make sure that they were not rubbing against each other in the box before placing them underneath the mattress. When I looked up, Rora was standing next to me. "Can I have one?" "One what?" I asked. "A penny," she answered. "Not one of those," I said. "These are special." She made a face and walked away, stomping her tiny feet. That evening, before going to bed, I checked on my pennies again. I then took off my shirt and carefully hung it on a nail in the wall and made sure my pad did not fall out of the pocket. After our prayers, we slipped into bed. I had trouble falling asleep. I can't believe we are living in a house, I thought to myself. My little brothers must have been excited too, because they started whispering and giggling. Roberto tried to quiet them down, but they would not stop. "Listen," Roberto said in a loud whisper. "I hear La Llorona weeping upstairs." "I don't hear anything. You're just trying to scare us," Trumpita answered. "No, I'm not," Roberto responded. "Just be quiet and you'll hear her." There was dead silence the rest of the night. The next day, before sunrise, Papa, Roberto, Trumpita, and I went to pick grapes for Mr. Partrini. Mama stayed home to take care of my little sister and brothers. I took my notepad with me. I wanted to learn more spelling words while I worked, but I couldn't. The angry, blistering sun did not let me. By 10 o'clock, my shirt was soaking wet. I wiped my hands in my pockets and carefully removed the notepad from my shirt pocket. I took it to the carcaricha and left it there. I did not want it to get dirty or wet. By the end of the day, my whole body was covered with dust from the vineyards. My arms and hands looked like they were made of clay. I scraped the muddy layer off of them with the hooked knife I used for cutting grapes. At sundown, when we got home, Mama and Rora drove to the store while Papa, Roberto, Trumpita, and I stripped to our underwear and bathed in a trough that was behind the house. After we got dressed, I placed a notepad in the pocket of my clean shirt. When Mama returned, I helped her with the groceries. "Did you get any pennies and change?" I asked. She looked in her purse and handed me one. It was made in 1939. "Can I have it?" "Of course, mijo," she answered. I went to my room and add it to my collection. I took out my coin box from underneath my mattress and removed the top. The first layer of the white cotton was bare. "No, they have to be there," I thought to myself. I swiftly removed the cotton and checked the second layer. Nothing. My 1910 and 1865 pennies were gone. I rushed out of my room shouting, "My pennies! Someone took them!" When I got to the kitchen, Rora ran and hid behind Mama, who was standing beside the stove preparing dinner. "Did you take my pennies?" I yelled at my sister. "If you did, give them to me." Holding onto Mama's leg with her left arm, Rora extended her right hand and offered me 2 gumballs. "I don't want your gum, I want my 2 pennies," I shouted. She dropped the gumballs and started whimpering. "Calm down, Panchito," Mama said. Then looking down at my sister, she said, "Mi hija, did you take Panchito's pennies?" Rora nodded sheepishly. "And what did you do with them?" Mama continued. Rora pointed to the gumballs on the floor. "Did you put the pennies in the gum machine at the store?" she asked. When my sister nodded again, my heart dropped to my stomach. I felt my face on fire. Everything blurred. I stormed out of the house and slammed the door behind me, and sat on the front stairs and cried. Seconds later, Mama came out and sat beside me. "I know how disappointed you are, mijo, but your sister is only 4 years old," she said tenderly. Then, clearing her throat, she continued, "Let me tell you a story I heard when I was a little girl. Long ago, there lived a very smart ant who saved her pennies for so many years that she became rich. Many animals wanted to marry her, but they frightened her. The cat mewed too much, the parrot talked too much, and the dog barked too loud. A bull and a goat also scared her, but not a little brown mouse named El Ratoncito. He was quiet, intelligent, polite, and mannerly. They got married and lived happily for a long time. But one day when the ant was cooking a pot of beans, she fell in and drowned, leaving El Ratoncito with a lot of pennies, but terribly sad and lonely. So you see, mi hijo, Rora is more important than the pennies. Do not be so hard on your little sister." Mama's story calmed me down a little, but I was still angry at Rora. I took a deep breath and went back inside to our room. I sat on my mattress and pulled out my notepad from the shirt pocket. I turned to the page where I listed my pennies and crossed out Lincoln Head 1910 and Indian Head 1865. The following morning, before going to work, Mama and I covered my notepad with waxed paper to keep it clean. I then marked the spelling rules I wanted to memorize that day. As I picked grapes, I went over them in my mind, looking at my notes only when I had to. This made the time go by faster. On the way home from work, we stopped at the gas station to get kerosene for our stove. The attendant filled our 5-gallon tank and placed it in the trunk of the Cucaracha. When we got home, Papa gave Roberto the car keys and asked him to unload the tank and refill the stove with it. "Panchito, this does not smell like kerosene," Roberto said as he took out the tank from the trunk. "It smells like gasoline. You better go tell Papa." I went inside and told Papa. He was nailing a wallboard that had come loose in our room. "I am sure it's fine, mijo. It's probably cheap kerosene," he answered, and continued hammering. I took off my shirt, placed it on the mattress, and then went back outside. Papa said, "It's okay," I told Roberto. He shrugged his shoulders, picked up the tank, and carried it into the house. Mama was getting ready to cook dinner. She cleaned the stove to make it easier for Roberto to refill it. The stove sat on a small table underneath a window that had plastic curtains. When Roberto was finished, Mama placed the pot of beans on one of the burners. She then lit a match. As soon as she touched it to the burner, the stove burst into flames, setting the curtains on fire. "Ay, Dios mío!" Mama exclaimed, pushing Roberto and me away from the stove. "Viejo, the kitchen is on fire!" she yelled. I was terrified. The black plastic curtains curled up. Pieces of melted plastic fell to the floor, giving off dark smoke that smelled like burned rubber. Roberto picked up the dishpan full of soapy water and hurled it over the stove. It made the fire worse. Like thirsty tongues, the flames chased the water as it ran and spread on the floor. "Get out!" Papa shouted as he rushed in the kitchen and saw the flames. "Out! Out!" he repeated. Mama, Roberto, and I ran to the front of the house. Trumpita, Ruben, Rora, Torito were already outside. We all stood by the Cucaracha. When I saw Mama sobbing, I felt more scared. A few moments later, Papa came out coughing and clenching in his arms something wrapped in a blanket. His hair was singed. He placed the bundle on the ground and uncovered it. The instant I saw the silver metal box, I thought of my notepad. "Mi librito!" I screamed out, recalling that I had left it in my shirt on the mattress. I dashed toward the house, but Roberto quickly caught up to me and grabbed him by the back of the T-shirt and yelled, "Are you crazy?" "I have to have it," I cried out, pulling away from him. Papa rushed over and stood in front of me. "Ya, no seas tonto, Pancho," he shouted angrily. His glare frightened me. I stopped struggling to get away. Roberta let go of me. I clenched my fists and tried to hold back my tears. By the time the firemen came, the house had burned down completely. The dying flames looked like they were coming from under the ground. Papa picked up our savings box and started walking toward the barn and said wearily, "Let's stay in the barn tonight. Tomorrow we'll look for a new place." Everyone followed him except me. I stayed behind. "Come on, Panchito," Mama said. When she saw I was not moving, she came up to me and placed her arm around me. I burst out crying. Lifting my chin with my right hand and looking me straight in the eyes, Mama said, "We are safe and we have each other. Gracias a Dios." "But what about my librito? It's gone, just like my pennies," I responded. After a long pause, she said, "Do you know what was in your librito?" "Yes," I answered, wondering why she asked. "Well, if you know what was in your librito, then all is not lost." I heard Mama's words but did not understand what she meant until a few days later. We had to move to a labor camp also owned by Mr. Petrini, and were picking grapes again. It was a scorching hot day. My clothes were drenched in sweat. I crouched underneath the vines for shade, but the heat pierced through. I recalled the fire and placed my right hand over my shirt pocket. It was empty. Feeling a lump in my throat, I started thinking about Carl, my pennies, the house. Then for a long time I thought about my librito and what Mama said. I could see in my mind every word, every number, every rule I had written in my notepad. I knew everything in it by heart. Mama was right. It was not all lost.